are exactly 2 weeks away from Thanksgiving, if that seems possible. And I know I'm excited for the mashed potatoes, mostly the mashed potatoes and the gravy. You have to put the peas in with the mashed potatoes and then have like little turkey treasures that you buried in there and just like have it all mixed around with the stuffing in it. That's really the only way to do it, in my opinion. So how many of you, by the raise of hands, are going to be around people during the holidays you might rather not be around?
Hard to say.
I saw a meme today that said, Thanksgiving is about counting your blessings one by one as your relatives walk out the door. Family can definitely pose some challenges to enjoying the holidays. A while back, I had a fun Thanksgiving experience where my aunt decided to come to Thanksgiving completely high as a kite. And we were trying to pass the food around, and she's sitting there with her hand on the mashed potato spoon, just kind of in and out of consciousness. And every time there's a loud noise, she'd open her eyes a little bit and talk as if she was going on with a normal conversation. It was really something to watch that whole time. I have an uncle that really gets on everybody's nerves. He's not very self-aware, and he loves to complain. It's like his main pastime. That's all he does. And when you give him advice, does he take it? No, nothing. There's nothing you can say to him that he will actually take and use. And so that's frustrating. And then also had a family member, mom, little ears may need to be and out of the room for this part. We good to talk about that? Give me a nod if we're okay. Ex-sister-in-law, we had this Christmas where it was my wife's job and I to bring the turkey. And there was a blizzard that morning and we had to drive 45 minutes. It was just stressful and we were trying to get ready to leave and we totally forgot the turkey, or maybe it was a chicken, I don't know. She had this huge plan to make it a dinner and that was like the main centerpiece. And we felt horrible about it. But rather than like show her disappointment and talk to us, she just hid in the basement and we could all feel like these hate rays coming up through the floor at us. And it made the day a little bit harder to enjoy because of that. So I had some interesting holiday experiences with difficult people. I'm sure you guys have run into a couple of these different personalities in your own family or with your friends, right? So for some people, the holidays are not something to really be celebrated. They're something to be survived. And that stinks because the holidays are supposed to be the best time of the year. Wouldn't it be so awesome if we could just change those people, right? Like how much more would that simplify things if they would just change? Sometimes we fantasize that if we could just take them aside and say, stop being crazy, like maybe it would work. Maybe if we just said it enough or strongly enough, right? But you came here tonight because you wanted to learn how to deal with difficult people, right? Well, tonight you're going to learn how to change these people. Does it sound too good to be true? That's because it is. We cannot change the other people. You can't change them, and I know that makes some of you think about just hanging up and doing something else with your Thursday night. We can't change them, but we really have a hard time accepting them. And we have a hard time accepting the fact that we can't change. It's like on some level we know it. We know we can't change them, but we still try. And if you have ever tried to change somebody, you know what a disaster that can be. Does anybody know what I'm talking about here? When you try to change somebody, it doesn't work so good. We have a hard time accepting that. When we hold on to that idea that we can change them, when we haven't fully accepted that we can't, we feel stressed out. It makes it really hard to enjoy our time with them. It makes it really hard for us to enjoy the holidays because we make ourselves miserable. And the whole time we're blaming the other person. We're going, well, if they weren't that way, I could be okay. We have the frustration and we have blame. But we can't change them. So tonight you're going to learn what you can do, not to change them, but to make it bearable so that you can have an enjoyable time, even when you're around the difficult people. So that hopefully these holidays can be better than they have been, so that it'll be easier for you to deal with difficult people in general. But before we go any further, let's take a moment and let's wave at our cameras to thank Wendy for setting this up for us. Without her, we wouldn't be here. And she is well aware that we really need this. A lot of people really
I know I
need
do. It's pretty much a selfish endeavor,
this. You just chose this for you, right?
right? I just make
So
the classes for me and then assume other people will show up.
right. It works. So if any of you have any questions, we will have a Q&A session at the end. So please send your messages to Wendy. You can send them to her email address that you got in the link for the Zoom, or you can just send them through the chat box and she will collect them. Or you can just wait to ask it in person once we get to that point. So why is it that we struggle with these difficult people? Well, the reason is they violate our values. Whether we know it or not, we have this internal code of ethics. We often don't really know what they are until something comes along and breaks one of them, something violates them. That's actually a really good way to figure out what our values are. We just have to wait until something makes us angry, because that's the response, really. When something violates our values, we get instantly frustrated, instantly angry. So for example, like, I care about accuracy almost more than anything. I've been wired to care about accuracy first and foremost in my life. So when someone says something that isn't quite true, it makes me squirm. I'm that the actually guy who has to correct everything. It just makes me sweat. Let like a lie or a understanding go without being questioned. So because I value the accuracy very highly, more than not rocking the boat, the people who value not rocking the boat have tended in the past to have a real problem with me. I'm just happy for when the truth is there, and I don't really care how people take it. But the other people hate that. I have not gotten along with those types of people very well in the past. And it causes a lot of drama, because I'm like, these people don't even care about the truth. They're gonna just sit there and believe their lies. And they're like, Kenneth doesn't care about us having a good time and making this like a peaceful experience for everyone. Not much of a diplomat, right? Sometimes we are that difficult person that's hard to be around. So these people, they break one of our values, one of our rules, and we get mad at them. What do? Should we try to change our values? Should I try to not care about truth and accuracy? I just don't think that's going to work, considering I was kind of wired that way from a very young age. But we know that we can't change them. And so there has to be a third way to deal with that. So what is it? How do we fix things if we can't change our values, or if we can't change them? Well, we'll get to that in a minute. But first, we need to talk about when people are violating our values that have to do with safety or our dignity, our well-being. We need to talk about abusive people. I need you to know that you have no responsibility to be around abusive people. We kind of tend to have this belief that family is number one. It trumps everything. It's the highest value, and we have to be loyal. It's loyalty above all. I think probably a lot of that just comes from our history as humans who grew up and lived in groups of like kinship groups of 50 to 200 people. The tribe was everything. If you were in the tribe, you were safe. And if you were out, you're probably dead. So we just have this baked into our minds, into our DNA, that we have to be loyal to our group no matter how poorly they treat us. But that's just not true. It may be what we think, that we have to stick with them for safety, but it's not. I have never actually met my father-in-law. I've seen him once, but that was about it. He was not the type of guy who's going to win Father of the Year. One of my wife's earliest memories was him throwing one of those like big plastic high school tables at her head when she was around 3 years old. He's bipolar, he refuses to take his medication, and he's caused some really deep wounds in his children. And the last time she talked to him, other than to call and say, hey, I'm engaged, was maybe 6 months before, when he called her a word. It's one of those words that you can't even spell out. It's one of the words where you don't even give the first letter of it. And this wasn't the first time. But he has been abusive on that verbal level to the nth degree. And that was the last time that she talked to him, because she didn't want to have to put up with that. And that's okay. It's okay to cut people out of your life who are abusive like that, because your well-being is more important than family loyalty. Your mental health is more important than everything else. And these people may have given birth to you, but you don't owe them anything. You don't owe them abuse. If you have a rabid dog, you're not just going to let it in the house. You wouldn't let rattlesnakes sleep in your bed. So why would you let someone abusive be around you like that? Sometimes cutting people out of your life can be the best thing for you and for them. And it might take that for someone to finally realize that what they're doing is not cool. Sometimes you have to set a really strong boundary to help hold them accountable. But you see, sometimes we err too much on the side of niceness, but we're not actually doing them any favors when we let them abuse us. Because if we're being a doormat, then we're showing them that it's okay for them to walk on people. And it's not just us they're walking on. It doesn't make you a bad person for refusing to let people hurt you. You are not a punching bag, and you are not some kind of cosmic whipping boy. Now, with that being said, there's a difference between abusive people and difficult people. So don't go around saying, hey, Kenneth told me that I can cut people out of my life if I don't like them, because there's a difference there. When it comes to setting boundaries, there is a scale. You might need to completely cut somebody out of your life. They may be that egregious in the abusive arena, right? But you might just need to set a smaller boundary, like time you spend with them, or a limited context of how you hang out with them. For example, maybe your mother-in-law is just a total raunch beast. And every time she comes over, she criticizes your cooking, she criticizes your parenting, and she criticizes your house. Now, setting a boundary with your mother-in-law means that your spouse can never see them again. It could be a problem. So if it involves two people like that, you're going to need to have that conversation with your significant other. Because, you can't really cut people out of other people out of their lives, you know what I mean? So if it involves other people, it's going to need to be a discussion. But there may need to be a boundary set. So what is a boundary? A boundary is nothing more than a rule for interaction. For example, if you eat half of my pizza, my half of the pizza, then we're getting divorced. And this has been sometimes an actual boundary in our relationship. You eat your half, I eat my half, and you don't touch my pizza, right? So for my wife, the boundary she set with her dad was, we're not going to talk to each other until you take responsibility for the things that you have said and for the things that you say. And that's a highly appropriate boundary, because she's protecting herself from more abuse that she doesn't deserve, that doesn't really make her life any better. How do you decide what kind of boundary to make with people? I would generally say try to do the least intense thing possible, the thing that's the least invasive. Start small and then escalate as needed. It's really tempting to go straight to the nuclear option. That's usually because we have been holding this stuff inside for weeks, months, or years, and we feel like we're going to explode. So when do you want to set the boundary? When do you want to talk about this? Definitely sooner than later. And before you do, I would highly recommend sitting down with your journal and writing out all of your feelings and just dumping the emotion there. Because if you're holding this energy inside, you're kind of like a taser. And anybody that gets too close is going to get shocked. So you got to dump the emotions first so that you can approach this with a clearer head, and so that you can make your decision ahead of time, so that then when you sit down with them, it won't be a bloodbath, right? So you want to definitely approach it as early as possible. Rid yourself of the emotions first and then do that. Because if you go in there and you blow up at them, likely you're going to feel guilty. You're going to feel like a horrible person. And then when we do that, we kind of feel like, well, we deserve the abuse and we may let it go on longer. We need to let them be like horrible to us to try to balance it out somehow. Kind of like when your kids push you and they push you and you finally yell at them, then you feel bad and they know that you feel guilty. And so then they take advantage of it and you feel like you can't really enforce the rule right there, right? The kids know exactly what they're doing there. If we feel guilt, we'll let them get away with more. So how do we hold people accountable then? When we set the boundary, we need to know, like, if you have a rule, if you're going to set a rule for somebody, you have to actually follow it, or it's not a rule, it's a suggestion. And we see this in parenting all the time. Parents try to set boundaries for the kid, but then the kids don't follow them, and then the parent doesn't enforce it. The parents don't say anything about it, or it's like, hey, stop, you're not supposed to do that. And the children get the message, oh, this is not a hill that my parents are willing to die on. I can get away with it. It's kind of like The Simpsons. I am a child of the 80s and 90s, and The Simpsons came on when I was around like 8 years old. And I don't know if you remember this, but back in the day, The Simpsons was kind of like a raunchy show. It was pushing the boundaries. It wasn't like a normal 80s sitcom. It was irreverent, and Bart was telling adults to eat his shorts, and all the parents were worried that this would be the downfall of the youth, right? And, The Simpsons probably isn't appropriate for an 8-year-old, but we had the household rule that we couldn't watch it. But being kids, we tested the boundary and we would turn it on sometimes and try not to get caught. And a parent would walk in and be like, hey, you need to turn this off. Well, there was one day we were watching an episode where a guy was about to get the electric chair in the prison. And a hurricane came through and ripped off the roof of the building. And the guy who was about to get shocked flew up into the air and went, oh, so long, suckers. And everyone in the prison was like, oh. And the guy flew into the electrical lines and got shocked. And everyone in the prison was like, yay! And that was the moment that mom had walked in and she laughed at it. And when she laughed, we knew, like, ha, we got her. She thought it was funny. Now we can watch this. We just wore her down, and then the rule went away. If we set a boundary, we have to make sure that it's something we're going to uphold and stick with. Don't set a boundary if you're not willing to enforce it. And that's good advice for every kind of human relationship, basically. So sometimes you set a boundary without saying anything at all. You just kind of stop talking to a person. When my wife was called that special word by her dad, she just hung up the phone, and that was it. She wasn't going to talk, and he knew what he did. But most often, when you're setting a boundary, it's best to tell them and not just give them the cold shoulder, because we need to be better than that. If you're setting a boundary with someone out of any sense of punishment or pettiness, you're doing it wrong. We need to be better, but we need to be able to hold them accountable for the right reasons. And here's how we do this. Here's how you set a boundary. You're going to want to write this down. First of all, decide what the boundary is. And again, as you're doing that, maybe first step 0, get the emotion out. Everything, write it in your journal, like, oh, I can't believe this, I don't want to put up with this. And if that doesn't get you calmed down, do 50 push-ups. Or I got a tree branch outside and I just go hang from it and I do pull-ups and raise my knees to my chest as much as I can. I can do like 2 or 3 of those and I'm completely wiped out. Wipe out the emotion first. Then decide what the boundary is. We need to cut this person off completely. If they're abusive, truly abusive, okay, that can be good. But if they're just a difficult person, what will work? So if that stepmom is criticizing you, maybe the boundary you decide to set is she can't come to the house and you only meet in neutral third-party locations, or you go to her house, right? The next step, as you're sitting down with a person, you need to start by saying something that makes them feel like you're on the same team, that you have shared goals, that you are their friend and not their enemy. This is very important. Just go in with guns blazing, or else it can hurt the relationship more and make it impossible maybe for it to be healed in the future. If you're setting the boundary, likelihood is you have more emotional maturity than this person. And I think in my book, that kind of gives you a responsibility to do more, take care of that. Because if they're acting that way, then they probably don't have the skills to not act that way.
Can I make a comment, Kenneth? Something that's really helped me, at least with the beginning part of this, is to think about, because I always felt like, well, I can't have a boundary with people that I love because I don't want to damage that relationship. And my therapist said to me once, yeah, if you really think about it, it's much, much kinder and better for your relationship and healthier for your relationship. It's a much kinder thing to do, to have a boundary so that in the future your relationship is healthier.
Right.
And that just, I don't know, that shifted a perspective for me, because it always just felt mean. Like I didn't have a right to push back against what they were trying to do. But really, when you think about it, it's much better for your relationship because it builds your relationship and helps you not be resentful in your relationship to have that boundary, than it is to have that tension be there. So to think about it as a kinder thing to do in the beginning also helps me to be less emotional and less frustrated, to go, okay, this will make our relationship better if I can do this thing. Anyway, that's just
Right.
for the way that I think about that. I just wanted to pop it.
We have that expression, cruel to be kind, right?
Yeah. Gotta
It's
be cruel to be kind.
in everyone's best interest to make sure people treat each other well. And that means that sometimes people are going to get their feelings hurt, but that can't be our highest value of not hurting people's feelings, because if we prioritize that over people being treated well, it's going to be chaotic. And
everybody else controls our feelings rather than us having any control over ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah. So this kind of statement, to make sure that you're all on the same page and that they feel that you're a friend and not an enemy, could sound something like this. Stepmother, we want to spend time with you. We want you to be a part of our lives and our grandkids' lives. Something like that. Like, we care about you. We want the same things. And then the next step, you need to state objectively what the problem is. When you come over in the past, you've criticized me. You don't say, you always criticize. No. It's an objective statement like, there has been some criticism in the past that you've done. Not always, not never, just this is what's happened. And then the next step, hear the impact of that. When you criticize me like that, it hurts my feelings. I also feel like it sets a precedent where the children watch that and they're learning maybe a lesson that I don't think they should learn. And then you explain the rule. And because of that, I'd love to have you here. I want you to be in our home, but not if you're going to criticize. So if that continues, then we're not going to be able to have you over. You just explain it simply. You criticize, you can't be here. And then you refuse to argue. They're probably going to want to. They're probably going to feel really defensive when you set the boundary, and that's normal and that's okay. And you can handle this. Just breathe deeply and just stick to your guns and be like, I know, yeah, I understand. It's hard. I realize this is difficult, but this is the boundary that we need to set. Just don't argue. Just stick with it. Stick to your gun. And if they change, then you need to change the boundary too. Remember that this isn't for a power play. This isn't for a grudge. This isn't to punish them. This is for protection. And if it turns into a grudge, then it ceases to be a good or a useful boundary. Right? So most of the time when it comes to difficult people, the problem is actually with us. I've got some hard truths to share with you. We basically all think that everyone should have our values. And when people break our rules and our values, we get upset. Like, how dare they not think the exact same way I think? You may be thinking like, but my values are good. They're just like nice to each other. Why would that be a bad thing? And I'm not saying it is. The world would be a much better place if everybody lived by those kind of values. It'd be better if we prioritize kindness and truth and that sort of thing. That's just not the way the world works. And to be frustrated about that doesn't change it. I mean, you're going to deal with a difficult person, but if you deal with a difficult person and you're frustrated about it, now you have two problems, and one of them is completely unnecessary. Like I said, we can't change our values. There's always going to be this instinctive reaction of, I don't like it when they do that, and that's fine. And we know that we can't change them, so we need that third path I talked about. So what is it? I hope you write this down. The third path to deal with difficult people, the path that works, and this is really your only other option, is to see the bigger picture. What do I mean by that? We often get stuck looking at a smaller picture. Ours is usually, they're doing a thing I don't like and I am annoyed. I don't like that they act like this. This person exists just to pester me. And the bigger picture says they only act that way because that's what they know how to do. And if they really understood how to do something differently, maybe they would. They don't. They don't know any better. The behavior you consistently see out of people, whether this is adults or children, represents the best they can do. No, that's a hard truth to understand. We talk about, well, they should know better. Well, they don't, and they can't. And knowing something intellectually is not the same as changing a behavior and emotional reactions. And if you disagree with me, then why have you been trying to lose that last 10 pounds for how many years? We know what we need to do to lose weight and be healthy, but we don't do it because it's not about intellectually knowing it. It's about knowing it in our heart. So I promise you, the people who are annoying you and acting poorly are only doing it because that's the best they know how to do. I've got a friend who texted me the other day. He was really frustrated because he was trying to cuddle with his wife and she rejected him and shut him down pretty hardcore. And I kind of said, like, how are you seeing this? What's going on? And his small picture was, she doesn't care enough about how I feel to want to change. And that causes him to hurt. This way that he's seeing it, the story he's telling himself to explain behavior was, she doesn't care about me. And it's actually true. She doesn't care enough about him to change. But then he was also telling himself the story of, and that's because I suck. That's because I'm not good enough as a human being. And that's just not true. But the reality is, she doesn't care enough about him to change. And it's because she can't. She does not have the room in her brain to care about him because she doesn't really know how to care about herself, and she never has. She doesn't know how to take care of herself. She doesn't know how to take care of her emotions. And so he represents a drain on her resources. Like the idea of having to emotionally take care of a husband, make sure they're happy. And she has this false idea that she has to carry his entire happiness, when really he just needs like some connection with her. He needs to be able to talk to her and cuddle sometimes. And so she's got this false belief, and then she thinks that she's not good enough to do it. And so she keeps her emotional distance from him, and she's kind of cold. She's afraid that she can't do the normal job that's the job of every spouse in a relationship, in a marriage. It's all because she doesn't think she's good enough. Her self-worth is low. She doesn't love herself. And so, yeah, she's not caring about his needs, but she can't because she doesn't know how to care about her own needs. She doesn't know how to meet her own needs, or she doesn't feel like she's worth the effort to meet her own needs. And that can be a very common thing. Seeing this bigger picture changes it. It's not, my wife's rejecting me because she doesn't love me because I'm not good enough. It's, well, she's rejecting me because she rejects herself. And that's a lot easier to deal with. So if there's somebody in your life who's difficult, no matter how prideful they may seem, if they're one of those boastful people that seems to be too confident, I promise you that's not real confidence. Real confidence doesn't need to boast. It's because they don't like themselves. Pride is the covering we use to hide our feelings of insecurity and inadequacy. So it's not overconfidence. It's underconfidence, really, trying to hide itself. So this bigger picture, this third way of dealing with difficult people is a more complete picture. Because if you're just focused in on the my values and this person breaking them, me angry, well, yeah, that's true, right? But if you zoom out and see the bigger picture, you recognize that this is a person who is in pain, who doesn't know how to do anything better. You don't know how to deal with all the crappy feelings they have about themselves. So seeing the person for how they really are, seeing this bigger picture allows you to feel compassion for them. This allows you to love them. And this is the third path. This is the only path you really have other than being frustrated. And that makes it the best path. Now, these people, will they still be kind of annoying? Oh, yeah, but it's going to be so much easier because you realize that this isn't about you. This is about this other human who is in pain. And when you see the big picture, you will be less likely to be annoyed because now you're relating differently to them. It used to be that your job is, you think like their job is to be how I want them to be. And their job is to not bother me, right? And if they're a pest, they should change themselves. But now when you see the bigger picture, you relate differently to them because you're seeing them as a human in pain. They're not trying to be annoying on purpose. They're just trying to get their needs met in ways that don't work so well. And you can leave it at that. And that will reduce the stress you feel around them. You just remind yourself, oh, they're just trying to get their needs met and they don't know any better. Therefore, this annoying behavior is not the worst thing in the world. But there's a better way. And because you relate to them differently now, you can change your relationship dynamic with them. So what's a relationship dynamic? Well, often your relationship dynamic with your in-laws is you are a person that I make small talk with, and we don't really require anything from each other. Or maybe you decided that this in-law is a person who's going to be a friend in your life. Like that's the role, that's the dynamic. We talk on a little bit deeper of a level. We spend more time talking to each other. We hang out at family gatherings more. It kind of comes down to the role that you have with this person that determines the dynamic. So maybe our job with a person is to nod politely while they tell the stories that we've heard 15 times already, and that's it. When I'm with family, I kind of have a default low energy mode that I'm in. And it's been this way my whole life, and maybe this is similar for you. Mine is just like, I'm here to entertain myself. And maybe yours is my job is to be like the hostess. I'm here to help everybody feel welcome. That's like a higher energy level. It requires you to interact on a different level and have a different dynamic where you have a different job. But at my family gatherings, I decided my job is just to enjoy myself by doing whatever I want to do, right? It's a lower energy level. And it means that the results I get out of the relationships are not as great. But we can choose to have that higher dynamic with the people we like and the people we struggle with. We can go into a social situation with this secret mission to help people love themselves more. We can basically act like ninja mentors to the people around us, where we like hop in and do a tactical strike and we give them some compliments and we jump out and they're like, oh, what even happened? What was that? Where was that from? I feel good all of a sudden. Why? Usually I don't feel so good around this person. What's changed? The sister-in-law, it was very difficult to be around sometimes. He's one of those people who's taken on like the negative personality where everything is negative, and if she likes the meal, she'll say, well, that was terrible. And it's just her way. She's like, she got stuck in opposite day. Always negative, always sarcastic, and it doesn't help. Her laugh makes my eardrums explode and my guts just like liquefy. I can't handle this. I don't want to watch your 84th TikTok video. Thank you. So she can be difficult to be around. And there are times when I have chosen to be in my low energy mode and where I'm kind of letting the environment control me. Since I'm just deciding to entertain myself and she's being annoying, I'll treat her like a little sister who's annoying. And when she does something annoying, I just do it right back to her. I'm like, well, I'm just dishing out what she's serving up. I'm just sending it right back to her. I'm just gonna act like a mirror and show her what she's like. But guess what kind of results I've had from that?
Not
You can
great.
probably guess. They have not been amazing, right? So there are other times though where I've decided to change my relationship dynamic, where I relate to her as someone who's there to help her, where I'm there to be that kind of mentor to her in a way that she will allow me to. So I try to build her up in the way that I talk to her, in giving compliments and in talking about her hopes and dreams, by helping her to focus on what her dreams are, by encouraging her, by helping her to find out the things that she loves more and develop herself. My goal is to help her feel like she's wrapped up in a warm blanket, that I'm just like dishing out so much positivity that she feels completely accepted, because I know that's definitely not something she got from her dad ever. And like I said, I don't do that every time. But when I do, there's a difference, and I'm not as annoyed by her. And it's nice to walk away and to feel like, oh, I actually helped her today. And so I try to talk to her on those deeper levels. I try to talk about her feelings. I try to talk about her hopes and her dreams. And because of that, she's been more willing to open up to me. Because I was an outsider to the family, I think it actually gave me more power and ability uh, to gain that trust with her. Because I hit this really hard in the beginning of the relationship to make her feel safe with me. And it got to the point where like we were meetings every week for an hour just to talk about where she wanted to go in life and to work on challenges. And it was a really rewarding experience. So I have to remember during all this, and I want you to as well, that it's not your job to change these people. If you choose to come at them from this higher relationship dynamic, you don't have to change them. It's just your job to love them. You're not taking responsibility for them. You're just taking a higher responsibility for the way that you treat them. There's sometimes you have to say, this is not my circus and these are not my monkeys. And my sister-in-law went to jail. I'm like, okay, that's on her. She made a choice. She's gonna have a learning experience. Cool. My job was just to love her. So the thing we need to remember, and again, I hope you write this down, is that the only reason they act like that is because they don't love themselves. The only reason they're annoying is because they don't love themselves and they're trying to meet their own needs. I promise you that's true. And that's the long and short of it. And we can be annoyed like children who want to throw a temper tantrum that reality isn't what we want it to be. We can be annoyed that this person is at our family gathering and it makes it harder. Or we can choose to step up and be better people, take responsibility. We can choose basically to be in a state of vexation if we want. I love the word vexation. It's a state of annoyance or frustration, right? I'm just vexed, I'm annoyed, I'm angry. When we're in a state of vexation, this applies to every area of your life. We're basically just being frustrated that reality isn't how we want it to be. And that's not logical, because things are the way they are. We can choose to channel that annoyance at the world and reject things, and it makes us miserable, and it makes us miserable to be around. And then we're just like shooting these muck beams out of our soul at everybody because we've got this cloud of grumpiness because reality isn't the way we want it to be, darn it. When we're doing this, we're allowing ourselves to be controlled by our environment. And when we do that, that means that we are at the mercy of whatever happens to us. We're powerless. We feel unstable. We're really standing on shaky ground because the smallest thing can come through and ruin our day. So again, it's like having a tantrum when we don't get what we want. We're annoyed that the world is the way it is. But like I said, we can choose to be adults. We can choose to step up and make a decision that we're not going to let life control us, but we can choose our reactions. We can realize that this person that bugs us is there to teach us to be a better person, to teach us to be more compassionate, more loving, wiser. And it makes us better able to connect with other human beings because of it. And To be adults like that, I know that's the type of people that you're striving to be, because who else comes to a library presentation on a Thursday? But we need more people like you who can go into a stressful situation like that and create peace. Because contention, it's easy, it's automatic. If you've been on Facebook since the election, holy smokes, there's a lot of negativity in the world, and it's gotten so much worse, even just in the last month. And this contention, it, aside from being easy and automatic to go to, it causes stress, it ruins our relationships, it splits families apart. We have people unfriending each other because they share different opinions. It's splitting us into factions where we don't think of ourselves as Americans anymore. It's me versus you, not us anymore. Not out of many one, but my group versus your group, and you're the enemy. And if it keeps up like this, there's going to be much more than riots in the streets. There will be civil war. This is what happens when people get divided. So we need people who unify. We need people who are willing to unite rather than divide. We need people who are willing to be different and to stand out, to rise above the drab normality of instinctual reaction and anger and hatred. People who rise above the instinct to hold grudges. We need people to shine, people to go first and set the example and show the best way to live. We need people like you to be radiant. We need you to walk into a room and be the person where people feel a difference. Where they go, wow, that person's different than most people. I feel something when I'm with them. They've got this sparkle in their eyes and this spring in their step, and I just feel comfortable around them. Where I feel safe and loved and accepted as I am. And because of that, I feel like I have the courage to change because I trust this person. They love me as I am. And because of that, I can grow. When you choose to be radiant, it transforms the people around you. Maybe not as quickly as we would like, but it does work in the end. And that's how love works. When it's powerful, when it's true, when it's authentic and unyielding, it melts people's hearts and it inspires them to do better. The growth in my life has come from people who have loved me fully and accepted me as an annoying teenager, as an annoying 20-year-old, as an annoying 30-year-old. When I feel accepted as I am, I feel the ability to grow. I feel the freedom to grow. You choosing to take responsibility for how you react and to create peace is the thing that can help change the world. But to do this, we have to remember that these difficult people are worth our love. They need our help. They deserve our help. And they need to be accepted with their flaws so that they can have the courage to change. And so I hope you will take this mantra with you. I am here to heal hearts through love. I am here to unite. When you're at the grocery store, looking at your fellow humans, and maybe you're thinking judgmental thoughts, I hope the mantra will pop in. I am here to heal hearts through love. I am here to unite. When you're sitting down to Thanksgiving with your family, I am here to heal hearts through love. I am here to unite. Now you're a human and you're not perfect. And so there's going to be times that you need to step out of the room and just breathe and take a moment for yourself and go, whoa, that was intense. I can do this. And you'll remember as you take your deep breaths, to feel gratitude for these difficult people because they provide such an incredible opportunity for you to change, for you to be more patient and loving. The greater the opposition, the greater growth needed to get there. And because these difficult people in your life are in your life, you will be different. You will be a higher caliber human being. And you will be the type who can walk into a place where there's division and hatred and grudges and people not talking to each other and be able to start healing hearts, uniting people and bringing them together. I don't think there's anything more beautiful than someone who can create peace in a world that is so fractured and so violent and so hard to live in. This is your choice. And I know that you're the type of people who are up to the challenge. And so I hope you'll join me in committing to be radiant, in committing to love rather than to hate, and to unite rather than divide. And I hope that you will also be compassionate with yourselves as you fall short, because these difficult people are difficult. And we don't have to pretend like they're not. But we can try in short bursts to love them and serve them and connect with them on a deeper level. Show up at Thanksgiving and say, I'm not just here to hang out with family. I am here to love and unite and heal. I am here to help people grow. I am here to help people feel so accepted that growth is the inevitability, the very next thing for them. Okay, who has questions about how to apply any of this or any other questions in general?
That was so great, Kenneth. I typed a lot of what you said in the chat, so if anybody didn't get something in their notes, it's possible that I got it a little bit in the chat. Hopefully I didn't botch the interpretation too much as I was trying to type while you were talking.
I very much got it.
So I think part of what you're saying too is that we change our expectations of people. That changing our expectations helps us to we can't expect people to behave in a way that upholds our own values all the time. And so if we want them to change, then the only way to that change is loving them to it. Is that it?
But also accepting them as they are and not having the expectation that they will
Right.
change, which is really, really hard.
Right. But if we wish they would change, then there's no change that's going to come before we accept them as they are and love them at that place. That's a good place.
People can feel it. They can really feel when they're not accepted as they are.
Yeah.
And we show that through these tiny little micro expressions of frowning and ignoring things and looking away. They can tell. So we've got to make sure first and foremost, we have kind of cleansed the inner vessel and we are seeing them through the eyes of love because we're seeing them as people who are in pain and struggling.
Yeah. And when we can't do that, that's when we have to have those boundaries.
We got to be patient with ourselves and work up to it and know that, like, maybe I can only see this person for an hour a year. And that's okay too. If they're just difficult, maybe we need to dig deep and journal about this and work through our problems and figure out what needs to change in us so that we can be loving. But if they're an abusive person, definitely a boundary.
Yeah. Okay, I'll be quiet. People can ask questions now. Anybody have questions?
And it could be any questions specifically about what we've talked about tonight or any random thing at all. Have some free therapy.
Anybody? Bueller?
Voodoo economics.
I'm pretty sure there was nothing in the chat but me. I'll look and make sure. Yeah.
It's the fact that I don't have any. Okay, I've got a question.
Mhm.
Okay, so it's not so much a question as a comment. I really appreciated how you said, it's kind of our mindset going into it. Sometimes I personally have the hardest time when I'm totally cut off guard, but it's like what you said, because our values aren't the same. So we shouldn't have that expectation that somebody's going to react as we expect. But that's when I have the hardest time. I'm just so shocked at the way someone treats me or reacts or whatever. So I appreciated how you brought that up about helping us to recognize that our values aren't the same and still kind of the mindset of we got to love them. And I really appreciate your suggestions and how to deal with that, because I'm very non-confrontational person, so I really struggle with these kind of situations.
And it can be really helpful too to try to manage our expectations ahead of time. There's something I read every morning is to remind me that if my wife's mad at me, I don't have to be afraid because my natural instinct is to run away. And so I remind myself, hey, if she's angry, that just means she's hurting and she needs your help, and you should probably hug her. And then it helps me to not be shocked when it happens, but I'm in a proactive mindset, ready to step in and help and minister to her needs. And boy, that makes all the difference. So you can just wake up in the morning and go, people are going to violate my values today. I'm going to go to the grocery store and people will be sticking their noses out, and I'm just going to have to be okay with that.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you too.
I have a question. So how do you teach your children this, where they often see everyone else as the hard person to get along with? But sometimes it's really, they're the ones that are kind of hard to get along with. They kind of feel like it's everybody against them. How do you approach teaching these things to kids or teenagers, really in particular?
How old are they?
Well, I have one teenager at home, and young adults, really. I mean, I'm kind of past that point with teenagers, but really it's, kind of spilled over into young adulthood. And it's not the same one all the time, but sometimes I feel like they just feel like they're kind of being picked on, and it's not really what's happening. They just see it that way.
Yeah. I mean, setting the example is going to be the most potent thing, especially if they can see you taking responsibility for things you may have done, and even bringing up stuff that maybe nobody said, but you might know rubbed someone the wrong way. You do that to their face, be like, hey, I just wanted to bring up the other day, when I said this, I realized afterwards it could have sounded kind of offensive, and wanted to make sure that didn't hurt your feelings, and if it did, talk to you about it. But when it comes to helping the kids become more self-aware, the first thing you're going to have to do is hear them out completely. Let them talk about how they feel like they're being mistreated or misjudged, whatever. And don't offer any resistance. Don't try to debate them. Don't try to help them see it from a different angle. Before a person can hear, they need to be heard. We need to seek first to understand until they feel understood. And that can be really hard, because if we care about accuracy, we're like, wait a minute, that's not how it is at all. So we just have to remember that when they're talking to us, they're sharing their perspective. And since they're a mortal human, they have a limited perspective just by nature. And they're not going to see the full picture, and they're not going to see other people's sides. And especially as teenagers or young adults, their brain's not done forming until they're 25. And so putting themselves into someone else's perspective is going to be almost impossible anyway. So we remember that this person sees the world this way, and that's kind of the reality they're in, and it's okay. And so as you hear them out, you want to validate them and just be like, oh yeah, that I can see why you feel that way, because you saw this, and then they looked at you this way, and then you felt like that, and that makes sense, because if somebody frowned at me like that after I shared that thing, oh, I would feel like I was being totally judged and ganged up on. That'd be really rough. And empathize with them, show them that you care. Like, sounds like it really hurt your feelings. What was that like for you? Can you tell me what that felt like? And after they feel understood, and after they feel cared for, then you have an opportunity to help them see it from a different angle, but only after they feel understood and cared for. And offer those things as a kind of a tenuous suggestion. I was just thinking about it. They were seeing this and this. I wonder if maybe they were thinking that when they were saying that to you. And you can offer those alternative views. But a lot of times they'll double down and go, nope, this is the way it is. And then I don't know, maybe some thought experiments to help them with other things unrelated to the thing. Because when they don't feel validated enough, that's often when they will hold on to something just with a death grip and not let go. They may just need more validation first before they see it differently. And quite often, if you validate someone fully and make them feel like they're not crazy and that their point of view is valid and you care about them, they'll see it themselves. They often already know, but they just need to feel cared for first. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
I've got one. What if you are caught between two people who are having the pricklies for each other, and you love both of them, but you can't seem to get them to bury the hatchet, as it were?
What age group are we talking about here?
Oh, adults.
Yeah, with adults, that can be a challenge. Before they're going to be willing to listen to you, they need to feel validated first. And that means stepping into their worldview, suspending your own worldview, and just recognizing this is just one way to see the world, not the full and complete way, just one way. But our perspective isn't necessarily full and complete either. And if you have the depth of relationship with them, where you can go deeper, then you can ask them about their motives. Like, hey, it seems like you really are having a hard time with this person. Can you tell me why that's difficult for you? Can you tell me what you feel like is at stake with them? Like, really having a hard time forgiving. What's going on? And often they're going to unbury some kind of hidden need that's there. And by bringing it to the surface and talking to them about it, that can provide an opportunity for you to find alternative means for them to meet that.
I think the biggest problem in the situation is that the one person is very needy financially, emotionally, and if that burden falls upon you to help the person who is financially needy, and this other person is not liking them because of this, why can't this person take care of themselves? What's the matter? Sort of thing. I think it goes a little deeper than just, I don't like the way this person acts.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know, that's part of the issue too, is it's a little bit more complicated. I'm sorry, I'm driving, so that's, if there's a lot of noise, I apologize. Anyway, that seems to have complicated the issue, is that there are some other needs that come out that complicate it, that make it more stressful. It's not just, I don't like what he's doing, but it's, darn, I have to be involved with helping this person and I don't like it.
There may be a boundary that needs to be set there.
Well, when it's a person who's going to go down and they're going to cause more problems, unless they get a little bit of support, you can't, there are some things like in this case, where you cannot completely abandon a family member because they are not able to handle themselves effectively financially.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of do some things maybe that aren't the best, but you can't just walk away and let them go down and never talk to them and set a boundary. I mean, there are certain boundaries that I've set, but it's hard to say this without giving names, and you probably know who I'm talking about, Kenneth. This family member has nobody else. There is no one else but me. So, I'm trying to make suggestions that are not being taken, And then these problems arise when the suggestions are not being taken, but they cannot function without a little bit of help.
Mhm.
And it's a toughie.
And maybe there's an opportunity to create stronger boundaries around that help, certain conditions, more constraints on those things, and to have the conversation, kind of laying it out like, hey, this is the problem, like the steps I mentioned. Here's the problem, and here's what needs to change. And it can be helpful too to put that back on them and go, well, what do you think we should do here?
It kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. Sometimes if you just say, look, I feel like our relationship would be so much better, and that we could, if we didn't have this elephant in the room that we're always talking around, and it's sometimes it feels like you have to be the one to be helping, when really the kinder thing is to have a boundary and not help at some point, so that they figure something out on their own, so that there's not that reliance on you.
I probably need to give a little more information on this. This is a person who is, well, it's my sibling, and he's got all kinds of health problems with his back, so he is on disability. He cannot work beyond a certain point. He's beginning to get a little bit, he's becoming forgetful. He is still living in our parents' home free of charge, other than the kinds of things you have to pay for, property taxes and etc. And so if he goes down, our parents have passed away. There are no other siblings. I am it. So I can put boundaries on things, but then he will forget. Literally, he will forget that he wasn't going to do something. And he's kind of in that gray zone where I have power of attorney and I am about ready at times to just take it over, but he still has his dignity and he still has his life. And I can't just say, I'm going to step in here. And at this point, I don't feel like I can do that. He is too much. He is too able to care for himself for the most part. So it's a difficult thing to face, to have to say, how much do I let him mess up before, because I can set boundaries, but they don't work because he just kind of is clueless.
He doesn't have the capacity to hold them himself.
Yeah, he's just become, over the years, and he is so, never married, never left home. He is emotionally just very stunted. So it makes how do you set boundaries with somebody like that financially when they will not survive? And if there is a problem there, he's got nobody else. And it's going to come back on me even worse if I don't manage it now, is kind of the way I see it.
Yeah, well, if he has that pattern of not being able to take care of himself, maybe it is time to do power of attorney and to say, look, if you want to earn your way out of this, I'd love that. But from what you're showing so far, all right, buddy.
That's probably about where we're at. Yeah, it is.
And it's again a difficult thing, but it really comes down to vexation or not. As crappy as it is, this is the reality.
Yeah, and to see the mistakes being made over and over again. And I mean, I saw this when I worked for an ambulance company. The same people would call multiple times because they would make a mess for themselves. And then somebody else had to come clean it up because they were incapacitated and couldn't do it. And so it kind of comes down to that point where you just have to step in, because do you let somebody starve on the street?
Right.
Well, no, you can't do that. So anyway, I don't know if there are any boundaries to set with that or not. I'll let you talk. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, you have power of attorney, and it sounds like that may be where you're at with this.
And maybe just boundaries for yourself, you know, if it crosses this line, then this is what I do, and I can feel good about it at that point. And that way your expectations are at a healthy place, no matter what the behavior is.
And when they're shared with him, like, hey, here are the rules we're looking at. What do you want to do? You're kind of leaving it in their court to set their own boundary.
Yeah.
Yeah. If he'll remember the boundaries.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Maybe you just set
Yeah.
the boundaries for yourself and you don't even have to, you know, expect him to remember. You just say, okay, if X happens, then this is what I will do, because that's what I feel like is, you know, appropriate at that point.
That's
And then-
that's about where I'm at. I just kind of decide if I'm going to answer the phone call or call back or whatever. And sometimes I just don't, because I can't deal.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And that kind of person who is extremely lonely like that, they tend to try to be a little bit manipulative, and they try to force you into being their social life. You know, he
Their
was
emotional
trying
support.
to rely. Yeah.
Mhm.
And he has branched out, but very negative. It's very difficult to be around him. So yeah, it has to be. I'm not dealing with this today. I have enough. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks.
Sometimes that's all you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are all some good case studies to think about. Anybody else have any questions
everybody
before we
for
wrap
coming.
up?
Mhm.
I always tend to jump in too fast and not let the silence hang long enough for people. I'm like, anybody? Okay. Well, it sounds like that is all everybody's questions, unless somebody wants to jump in and ask anything else. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much, Kenneth. That was super helpful. And it's always good just to kind of help shift how you look at things and how we think about things going into tough situations really makes a big difference in how we handle them. So thank you so much for helping us prepare. Thank you everybody for coming tonight. We'll
Thank you.
continue to have these probably online for a little while, but every month we'll have a different topic. And we should have that up on the library website and on Eventbrite for next month in the next 2 days. So everything should be available, and we have all the way through a few months of next year, all topics set up. So come back and see what else we're going to be talking about. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a good night. Kenneth, we have comments in the chat saying thank you so much. That was very helpful. Awesome. Yeah, that was really great. Do you feel good about that?
Mhm.
Yeah, that was good. I feel like it was helpful to people. I tried to summarize most of especially if you said, oh, you might want to write this down. I tried to put it in
Thank you. I noticed that.
the chat for people so that, you
You
know,
can just copy and
they
paste.
could refer back to it.